Pronunciation Pro.
Pronunciation Pro.
Hello again. Welcome to the Pronunciation Pro podcast. My name is Annie Rudin, and I am the host of this podcast and the founder of pronunciationpro.com. We teach non-native English speakers how to speak English, American English, clearly and with greater confidence. So today I actually have a special guest with me, Justin Scott. Say hello, Justin.
Hey, everybody.
Awesome. So Justin is a member of our Pronunciation Pro team. He is our English teacher, our certified English teacher. So I always say I'm not an English teacher. I'm an American accent trainer, which my background is speech pathology, and which gives me kind of a unique angle on how to teach the sounds of American English and how to pronounce things correctly and the accent piece. But we a while back, I was like, we really need an English teacher on call here to be able to help our students as they are moving through and improving their pronunciation and fluency. There usually is some gaps or things with grammar and vocabulary and kind of the language piece of English. And so that's where Justin comes in and kind of helps us in that way and helps our students that way. So we're glad to have you here today.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so today kind of what we're going to be talking about is, Justin is going to give us the top 4 kind of most common grammatical mistakes that our students tend to have. And our students here at Pronunciation Pro are more at the intermediate to advanced level. So what would you say? Like B1, B2, C1?
Yeah, B1, B2, and even into the C1 category.
Yeah, that tends to be kind of our demographic at Pronunciation Pro because, you really have to have a good solid foundation of grammar and vocabulary before you're really ready to refine it and start as far as pronunciation and accent. And so that is kind of where our students tend to be. But yeah, Justin has been working with our students. We have a weekly grammar group that meets every Saturday, and Justin leads that group and kind of helps our students work on some of these gaps and these mistakes in their grammar, and kind of teaches how to build greater vocabulary. And then you also do one-on-one trainings with our students.
Yes, I do.
It's part of our private packages, our Plus and Premier packages. We offer, you can do accent training, you can do confidence coaching, and you can do English grammar and vocabulary training as part of your package. So we offer that part of those private lessons. So that's been really fun to have Justin here because it feels complete. It feels more complete now where we can get all of those angles, all those areas that our students really struggle in. We have kind of that solution for. So glad to have you here. So tell us a little bit more, Justin, about kind of your background and what got you into speaking, to teaching English, and what has been a little bit of your path to as an English teacher.
Yeah, so I actually didn't start out as an English teacher, but through my undergrad and college, I was just traveling around the world a lot, doing a lot of mission work, and I loved other cultures and I loved learning from other cultures. But I found while I was overseas that while I was trying to learn from them, they just wanted to come up and talk to me because they wanted to practice their English. And so through kind of traveling to different places, I've been to India, I've been to Cuba, I just decided I actually wanted to do it full time. And so I went and got my master's in TESOL, teaching English to speakers of other languages, so that I could work with international students, whether I was in the United States or overseas, full time. And so my desire to teach others really came out of my desire to learn from others. And in return, I also get to teach them as well as they're learning English on their English learning journey. But I also get to sit down, whether it's through conversation or I've taught at colleges and through writing assignments and things like that. I also get to learn from my students about their home cultures, about who they are, and I really get to build that relationship with them. I'm a very relational teacher. I love the relationships that come from teaching even more than I love my content, and I love the content that I teach as well because I get to see how it helps my students in their everyday lives. And so I've been doing that now for a little over 5 years, full time and in a more professional setting than before. And I've loved every minute of it. And so,
That's awesome. And I love how you talk about it's relational because that's really part of our core values here at Pronunciation Pro is we want to bring clarity, confidence, and connection. And relationships are all about connection, right? And communication is allows us to connect with each other. It allows for that relationship to develop. And so when we're coming about it in a relationship type of feeling or purpose, it really brings us into that connection that we're all really wanting, right?
yes,
Yeah, that's
yes,
exciting.
definitely.
Well, good. Okay, so tell us a little bit. Maybe let's dive into the four common errors or mistakes that you tend to see. Like as you've been working with, you've had 5 years of really kind of working with non-native English speakers and helping them kind of build that vocabulary and that grammar, but also through our grammar groups that you've been doing. I know that there's a lot of common questions and mistakes that you're kind of working through. And what's interesting is when you have that kind of repetition, the same things tend to come up, right? It's like, you start seeing patterns. And that's the beauty of working with a mentor or teacher is that because we have worked with so many people, we see what the common issues are and then know how to kind of help solve for those issues faster than you doing it on, our students doing it on their own. So kind of help us kind of do that. And if you have any stories from, people from the grammar group and things like that, we'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the number one issue that I see my students struggling with, especially in the beginning, is verb tenses. And that's a really broad category because there are so many verb tenses and there are so many verbs and how we change those. But through repetition, and I know some students might get a little frustrated because they feel like it's a very basic skill that they sometimes feel they already have. But when we really start to get into it and we start to talk about how verb tenses change meaning and how it changes what we're actually saying and when to use certain verb tenses over others, they start to realize, oh, I don't really know this as well as I thought I did. And so we really start to kind of pull back those layers of it's okay that you don't know this because a lot of native English speakers also don't use these in the right way. And that's part of what makes learning verb tenses, especially the perfect tense for completed actions, so difficult to learn on your own because you can't just learn them from just because someone's a native speaker. Because even as an English teacher outside the classroom, I catch myself using certain tenses in the wrong setting to describe the wrong things, but I do it because I'm assuming that my listener knows what I mean, not what I'm actually saying. And so working through verb tenses is where I start with everyone because that's the foundation of English is verbs and how we communicate those actions. But one thing that was really cool is a few weeks ago, I was talking in our group class with one of our parents, and she was telling me about how she was able to walk into a parent teacher conference with her kid's teacher at school, and she was recalling things that we had talked about in our grammar group on Saturdays and how they actually helped her better communicate some of the things her daughter was struggling with and that the mom was actually helping her daughter with on her homework. And so that was really cool for me to see like this grammar group isn't just something we do on Saturdays. Like she's actually using what we talked about, 2 weeks before with verb tenses and how to use the perfect tense to better communicate with her teacher that she had to meet with because of her daughter. And so for me, that was just really cool because like that's why we do it for better communication, for those ideas to click. And it was so tangible because it was the exact topic with verb tenses we had been talking about that in the beginning she wouldn't have had that confidence. And so
Yeah.
that was really cool.
Okay, so I love that story because so many of our students here at Pronunciation Pro, like we've heard that concern of like, I want to be able to go into, talk with my kids' teachers and be able to have the confidence to really be the voice and speak and not just have my child kind of speak for me, or my husband speak for me, or my spouse, I guess, and be able to be that advocate for my child. There's a lot of confidence that's built, that saying like, I'm the adult here, I know what's gonna, like, I can lead this, and I can be in this discussion. So that's huge. But then to incorporate those skills, and so they're building that confidence through the skill building that they're getting. I love that. That's really cool. Can you give me an example of kind of verb tense and what you're talking about, as far as like some mistakes that might happen, and kind of what the solution is for that?
Right. Yeah. So with verb tenses, we have like three different categories and then three different base tenses. So our base tenses are your past, present, and future, which usually everyone knows. But then we get into the continuous tense, which you still have your past, present, and future within your continuous. But within that, you're talking about an ongoing action. So like I am learning English means I'm not finished with that yet. I'm not done with that task and I'm still actively learning English. Whereas if I said I learned English, I'm already done with it and I don't need to anymore. And then we get into our perfect tense, which I always warn my students is the most complex because this is the one that even native speakers struggle with. And this is where we talk about completed actions. So earlier, I actually used the example of I learned English. For me, that would actually be technically incorrect. I would say I have learned English because I've completed the idea of learning English before now. And so it's about completed actions.
Mm,
So we have landed on the moon. We have done that before now. And so it's a finished action. And so when we get into those three basic categories, we dive deeper into that, but the meaning changes between each of those three. And then you always have your past, present, and future within those three. That's why we call it our base tenses.
that's amazing. Yeah, that's really interesting. And not being an English teacher, but being in this world, it's like, whoa, there's so much that you've been trained in to be able to explain that and teach that in a really strong way, which just goes to like, when we have that expertise in that area, that like it's really important to be able to be learning from someone who has that understanding of how the language is structured in those intermediate to advanced levels. It's like there are just these little gaps or holes that, as you're kind of talking through it and they're learning, they're able to then be like, oh, that's what I was missing, that's the piece that I was missing in there, and that's what I can keep kind of practicing and improving on.
Right. And kind of within that is like, as we're stepping into, I know English and all of my students, they know English enough to talk with people and things like that. But we're trying to take that step from I know English well to I'm really starting to get it to where I don't have to think about it and second guess myself anymore. So we're
Mhm.
really trying to take that really big leap and not only in confidence, but also just in hey, I did it right. And I don't have to think about it. I'm just instinctively doing that right now instead of having to really work hard, like we have to do before we know English and we're still having to like translate in our minds. Now we're not having to translate. We're just confidently stepping into it to make that huge jump into our speed, our accuracy, and our confidence as well.
That's amazing. Excellent. Okay, what are some of the other common errors?
I would say the next two categories I'm going to put together. So prepositions, but also articles. And I tell people with these ideas, especially with prepositions, prepositions are the smallest words in English, but they give us the biggest problems. So when we talk about prepositions, we usually talk about like prepositions of location. So like in, on, at, prepositions of time, which would also be at or in, and then duration, which is also in. And so when we talk about these really small words, we're talking two or three letters a lot of times, but getting those words wrong can drastically change the meaning of what we're trying to say. And even like the word to, just to, when we're talking about location, we can tend to use some of those prepositions wrong or incorrectly. And even sometimes if we're not using it incorrectly, it's not about what's right and wrong, but what's about, better and best when we talk about language. And that's one of the complexities within English grammar is I have students ask me all the time, like, hey, am I saying this right? And they'll give me a specific example. And what they're saying is right, but there's usually a different way to say it that's just a little bit better. And so I like
Mm.
to encourage my students that I'm not saying you're wrong, but let's fine tune a better way to say certain things. And prepositions is usually where I see that the most. And so one thing I try to tell them is sometimes we use prepositions and we're saying it in a really long way, but there's a shorter way to say it. And in English, we always try to say it in the shortest way and quickest way possible. And so we try to work through some of those examples. And if you ask me any, I probably can't even think of any off the top of my head because I operate as a native speaker. So I always think of the shortest way possible. But especially with those prepositions. And then the articles is more about matching it to what's singular and plural. And, am I being specific here or am I being a little bit more general and giving them options? So our articles are just a and then the. And so do I want a apple, meaning like there's 10 apples sitting on the counter and I'll eat any of them? Or is there only one apple left and I want the apple on the counter? And how
Hmm.
specific we're being. And again, that doesn't change the meaning a lot as far as understanding, but we're trying to really make that leap into really showing them that, hey, I know English, so I'm going to be accurate in how I'm saying that. So those two I kind of put together because there are my short word categories.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so that is what I come across more often in my trainings with people too, is that I don't necessarily have the term for it or the reason for it, so it really helps to kind of get that from you, but I'll say, they'll say something and I'll understand what they're saying, but then I'll be like, here's how it's typically said. I'm going to take that same concept, and you explained it well because you put, you used all the right words, but I'm going to condense this into a more common phrase that native speakers say. And that is typically the level that our students are at, is that they have all the words, they have all the ability to do that, but then let's bring it into a more common, the kind of like, I like that way you said, kind of, there's a good way and there's a better way. That works fine, but here's another way that's even better. And so to have that training that helps you kind of develop that more native phrasing is really important. I also was working with someone this last week that the articles, she kept dropping the
Hey,
articles, and so I was writing it out and then was able to kind of identify, okay, this is actually a pattern for you as you're taking the out of it. And so and or the plural s is a very common one too, is you're frequently taking out that plural s. And so let's get those little pieces in there, because we're kind of at that top of that mountain that we,
yes,
as far as English language goes, where they've done so much work to get to this top, and that last 20% is really nitpicky. It becomes very
yes,
detailed, and it's hard to get in any way except for being with, working with native speakers and having that expertise feedback.
right. Yeah,
Hmm.
and then the last category I would say that I'm going to kind of use this to also segue into some of the most common questions I get from students in the group class is auxiliary verbs, or what I actually usually call them helping verbs if any of my students from the group class are listening. But our helping verbs are where there's two words in the verb. So like have learned, did learn, those, so that first word, did, have, had, that's called our helping because it can't be by itself. And in that case, we don't typically use the word conjugate in English, but we are conjugating, and I don't know why the background just did that, but that's funny.
Yeah, we're
Um,
recording videos, and he's got like these like fireworks behind him and like thumbs up. That's
but
okay. Go ahead.
but with with the conjugation, and we typically don't use that word in English to conjugate verbs, but other language backgrounds do. And so I like to use that word conjugate, and that just simply means us changing it. We change these words, but then we don't know what to do with the other part of the verb. So, like have learned, sometimes we'll just say have learned with no ed on the end of that. So we don't conjugate that correctly, or sometimes we'll conjugate the first word incorrectly. And so usually my students have asked me, especially in the last probably month or so, probably again because we're stepping into that fine tuning area, why don't we do these things? Why don't we change both words? And kind of walking through how to use those helping verbs in the correct way to say what we're trying to say, because we want to mean what we say, not just say something and hope that our listener understands it the way we mean it, but we want to
Mm-hmm.
say it exactly how we mean it. And usually the most confusion comes in when we start getting into those helping verbs because it gets a little bit more complex. That's also where our our three word, our phrasal verbs are going to come from too, is when we start to have a lot more auxiliaries, but we're going to change the meaning of that. And so trying to really focus in on say exactly what you mean. Don't just hope that people know what you say. And I see that the most, and I've gotten the most questions about it with auxiliary verbs because we use them, but we don't always know if we're using them correctly. And so
Mm-hmm.
practicing those is key.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's so interesting. And hats off, all my respect to all of you English language learners, because this is all a lot. There's a lot to really understand about the English language. And when there's so many different rules, and why do we do this and why don't we do like so often doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's so commendable that you're showing up and you're working on it and you're trying day after day after day. And I just want to applaud you for that grit and determination that comes for like as you are pushing against this boulder and pushing against this big rock. It's building such strong muscles of grit and determination and ambition, and your ability to overcome other challenges gets stronger as you are working through this challenge. So, very, very impressed with our students and what they've been able to accomplish in getting to that, intermediate to advanced level. That's not an easy thing to do.
Definitely, definitely. And as a note of encouragement to our students too, like I would just encourage you, like I didn't even know the reason why behind a lot of these rules
Mm-hmm.
until I jumped into my master's. Because as a native speaker, I had the advantage of just growing up hearing it. And so I just went through all this, doing it instinctively because I had practiced and rehearsed with that muscle. I had worked it out a lot. And so when I started getting questions from my students, especially that first year or two, about like, hey, well, why do we do this and why do we do that? I had to really do a lot of research and work as to why we actually do it that way because well, we just do it that way was no longer a good enough explanation for my students trying to learn. And
Mm-hmm.
so just take that as a note of encouragement. Like I struggled through the why behind a lot of these rules as well. I didn't just know the why behind them as well as I know them now at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's mainly I have to learn the why, mainly from students like you guys who just ask me these questions. And sometimes I answer in that group class. I'll have to look up why. Let me get back to you because I haven't had that question before. And so language is such a complex idea, not just English, because it's so broad, but it's so beautiful. And so I just encourage you to just like stay at it and ask those difficult questions because
Mm-hmm.
you might stump me in the moment, but I know where to look. I have the resources and know where to find these answers for you, and I'm going to do that. And I always send students all the time. They'll email me, hey, I just had a quick question, and I'll email them like a worksheet that has to do with that question so they can practice it. And so we're always trying to find ways to help you and get you the answers that you want, even if it's not immediate. We are going to do that for you.
Yeah, that's the value of having teachers and mentors that are there in your corner saying, "Okay, we're going to help you figure this out," versus trying to do it on your own. It just takes longer, it's harder. But when you have a mentor there, or you have teachers there that are competent, that really know what they're doing, it really guides you. Because I had a similar experience with pronunciation, is that there are all sorts of pronunciation rules that go along with English that most native speakers don't even understand. They have no idea why they're saying things the way they are. They just do it because that's how it's done. But it did take actually diving in and understanding the rules and the reasons why we do a long vowel versus a short vowel, or why, when the intonation rises and when it lowers. There are rules that go along with all of this. And so when you understand the rules, there's confidence in being able to be like, oh, okay, I understand the rule behind this, and so I can use it correctly with confidence, which is such a powerful skill set to have, and that our students are really doing a great job with. Yeah.
Yes, they definitely are. And I know, especially being on set, my class being on Saturdays because I work during the week, I know it's not easy for some of our students to get away on a Saturday to come. And so I know and appreciate the sacrifice that they make to,
Hmm.
show up on Saturdays and really make that class time really valuable and grow and learn and just continue to work out that muscle that is language learning, because
Yeah,
it's exhausting. I've
it
learned
is.
two other languages and it's tiring and it's not easy.
Hmm.
And, that maybe that gives me an extra value that I've been through that process before, that I know what they're going through. And so, my hat's off to them. We have some great students who work with us, and they work extremely hard just to improve and to get better every day.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, good. I'm so glad that you're part of our Pronunciation Pro team, and that you brought your expertise and your passion for it and your ability to connect with the students in such a powerful way. I know they've appreciated that assistance so much. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And for all of you who are listening who have not joined Pronunciation Pro, we would love to have you come and start refining, that, or not start, and you've been working on it and you've been refining, but to have us to mentor you and to help guide you and make it easier process in refining your English communication skills, refining that grammar and vocabulary, refining your pronunciation and accent. Like that process, we're here to help build. One thing I was going to mention is that, Justin, you did this I think it's like 4 lessons that you kind of built into the Pronunciation Pro program, where you're giving these foundational tools of tense markers and and articles and things like that. He has these 4 core videos that you can watch on your own time, that help you prepare then for the group lessons or the private lessons, so that you have that solid foundation of an understanding of these concepts, so that they can dive even deeper during the group session. So that was very, very valuable, and I'm so grateful that you were able to kind of contribute that to our program.
Yeah, and I think those videos have really been great because now students come into our program and they actually come with questions already about those videos, which is what I want. Like, I want to answer those questions to continue to dive deeper, but we're kind of skipping over, we're fast tracking maybe 20 minutes or so, laying that foundation. And especially in private lessons, I really get to know the student and what their goals are, whether it's further education or whether it's just everyday English, because as
Yeah.
crazy as it is, that's two different Englishes now, especially on the
Hmm.
grammar side. If we're going to stay in the educational, the formal world, or if we just want to get around and we want to improve our everyday English. And I teach both. And that's why I love the private lessons even more, is because I really get to build that relationship even deeper and really focus on those individual goals. But those foundational videos have been great, and just jump starting that process, both in the group and the individual classes.
That's great. Yeah, we love those private lessons, right? Just to be able to dive
Yes.
even deeper and really get to the very critical points that the students need. If you are interested in private lessons, we have the group lessons as part of our pro package. Our plus and premier package are the private lessons. And I do like to have a personal free consult with our students who are kind of interested in those private lessons, so that we can really get a clear idea of what your problem areas are, and which package would be the best for you. So reach out to us here at Pronunciation Pro, and go to the Pronunciation Pro website. You can sign up for a trial or just fill out the contact us form, and we'll get in touch with you so that we can provide you exactly what you need. So all right. Thank you so much for joining us today, Justin, and for being part of our team here in all that you're doing to help our students. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thanks so much for having me, and hope to see some of you soon.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. And we'll look forward to hopefully seeing you in the program here soon. And again, for those of our current students who are listening. So we'll see you soon. Bye.
Pronunciation Pro.
Pronunciation Pro.